Drought.
Okay, I'd like to open the meeting. Let's get a roll call.
Director Bragman,
Here.
Director Gibson,
Here.
Director Kohler,
Here.
Director Schmidt,
Here.
and Chair Russell.
Here. Okay, with that, I would like to get a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
President Kohler,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
and Chair Russell.
Aye. And now I'd like to get a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Move approval of the minutes from the May 21st meeting.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
President Kohler,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
and Chair Russell.
Aye. Okay. and-
Director Russell, I think that we had general public comment on the agenda. Do you want to go back and loop that in just in case?
Okay. Were there any public comments on the agenda?
Or as well as the general public comment. It's listed
that-
right after the agenda adoption. I'm sorry.
There are, yes, Rebecca Collins. Go ahead, Ms. Collins.
Hi, I have a comment on the discussion of desal, and should I wait for a different point in the agenda?
I think that would be better to wait.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
There are no further comments.
Okay. Given that, no other public comment?
That is correct.
Okay. Let's go to item 1.
You mean item 2, sir, because item 1 was the minutes.
That's what he means.
Okay,
Yes.
First report item.
okay, thank you.
Which one is item 2? I'm sorry, Terry.
That was the multi-year drought.
Oh, it's me. Good morning, Paul Cellier, Operations Director. Let me just share my screen for you. We're speaking in items I'm not familiar with. Here we go. So this morning's presentation is emergency drought projects. So these are projects to address our water supply if the drought were to extend into next winter and possibly even beyond. So today I'm just going to have a quick review of water supply. We looked at that briefly on and in some detail in charts on Tuesday evening. We'll just review that quickly. And then look at 2 water supply options, water transfers and desalination, and provide the committee with an update on what's been happening with these behind the scenes and discuss our next steps. So just reminding us all where we sit today, our reservoirs are, 40% capacity or so, and the reservoir levels are continuing to decline. If you're looking at the green line here, this is our actual reservoir storage today in June. You'll notice that the slope of decay or decline in storage is not much change from last year. When you draw lines on this and really try to measure it, you can in fact detect that the drawdown last year is a little bit steeper than this year, but still in a downward trend. And we see that when we measure the effect of conservation. We're seeing, I think last week, our indicators showed an 18% drop in use, which is good, but we need more. This slide, we also took a look at on Tuesday, and it represents the black line is our storage level today. And then the dashed line is the 2020 hydraulic conditions. So very conservative hydraulic conditions, but just reflecting that we don't really know and cannot predict the climate and what the rainfall and runoff are going to be next winter. So in planning terms, this is reasonably conservative, but also realistic because we've just experienced it. So we took 2020 hydraulic conditions and imposed them out into the future through 2022. We've also assumed in this chart a 20% level of conservation that's been achieved and sustained. And while we're at 18% last week, and hopefully that number is going to improve. But again, this is a tool for us to look at in planning terms. And again, 20% we feel is a reasonable conservative number there. Also,
I think it's kind of important to maybe note that that would be two back-to-back. Are you talking about the same hydrology that we experienced this year?
exactly.
And so that would be two unprecedented, like the two driest years on record back-to-back, which would be a pretty, I mean, we hope not for that, of course, but that would be quite extreme in conditions we've never seen.
Conditions we've never seen, but as we know, looking at history, it's sort of like buying stocks at this point.
Yeah.
It's just, past performance and so on. But it's an excellent point. It is a very low probability event based on our historical record. But when I raise the historical record, Chair Russell reminds me that may not be the most relevant set of data. So anyway, it is a conservative, we think. And also in here, represented in these storage levels is the continued dry year stream release, which would be in effect. To the chart that you saw on Tuesday, I've added an uncertainty band in terms of storage at the bottom here, which extends, just reflects that we've never operated the reservoir system below about 11,000 acre feet, and that was in the 70s. And so what can we expect? How will the system operate at these very low conditions? It just represents that there's a level of uncertainty there and a lack of experience that we have operating below this level. And then, of course, the sort of brown band represents the sort of stranded or unusable water that will be in the reservoirs. And maybe we can get access to some of that through some creative methods. But for the most part, we're assuming that bottom 10,000 acre feet of water represents some uncertainty for us.
Yeah.
And why might that be? Well, in addition to a lack of experience operating under these levels, reservoirs are not defined geometries like tanks are. So, calculating with great accuracy the volume of a reservoir and estimating with great accuracy the levels of evaporation and so on, there is this uncertainty that creeps in. So, so in terms of water supply, it does look like we'll hit that uncertainty band, in the next year, maybe next July, if this hydrology were to come to pass. And as Director Schmidt points out, we hope that it doesn't.
And this, Paul, if I can ask, the 20% conservation, this is assuming a 20% conservation.
That's correct.
And 20% from what base? Where are you starting that 20%?
So I think it's starting right away.
In other words, from the number we have, whatever we have, our last measurement?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the last week's water savings tracker indicated an 18%
Right.
savings, so it's pretty close.
And Paul, if I could just add to it, the other reason 20% is, while conservative is somewhat reasonable, looking at historical droughts, there's a notable distinction of how much conservation we were able to get in the summer versus winter months. So the winter months where you don't have the low-hanging fruit of irrigation, your percent reduction due to conservation will drop. And historically, it drops rather notably. So when we're projecting out in this time frame, even were we to get to 30+% in the summer, we're likely to see quite a drop in the percentage of conservation when we get into the winter months, because it's a bit tougher to get that sort of conservation with indoor use that you can get just by turning your sprinklers off in outdoor.
Yeah.
Can I just point out though that I think, I mean, I don't want to turn this into a debate about conservation, but I mean, Paul is projecting, as we've been discussing, a historic second year of drought, which you're absolutely right. We shouldn't be relying on the historic record. On the other hand, I think we should be acknowledging that this is pretty much a worst case scenario. That being the case, I think we could expect a high level of conservation, because the reason that outdoor use drops in the winter is because it rains, and you're projecting a winter in which it won't be raining. In which case, I'm not sure that the same assumptions should apply. So while I very much appreciate, and I think that the management team is correct to be bringing forward a worst case scenario, I want to be careful about being too conservative about conservation and having that push us to really ignore the enormous opportunity there that we really have not begun. We are nowhere near demand hardening, and I think we need to acknowledge that before we start really putting all of our eggs into very expensive alternative supply baskets.
Right, absolutely, President Cole. And I think those are very good points. And what we're just trying to do is, as we look at these projects and begin to think about the difficult issue of the timing of decision making with these projects, what would be the basis? And we'll have many more discussions on that in terms of the timing of moving forward with these projects. So we're just trying to, in part, orient the board to the potential timing, and we'll be doing a lot more analysis and direction from the board. The potential timing we would want, were we faced with these worst case scenarios in terms of proceeding on these very costly projects. But absolutely agree with your point.
Right. And again, I don't want to hold this up, but the other thing that's a little confusing to the point that somebody else just made, I'm sorry, I think it was Monty. I think talking in terms of percentages is confusing. So again, not to stop us right now, but I think it would be helpful to understand in terms of acre feet, right? I mean, if we're talking about some of these other projects, I think moving away from percent of conservation, we should be treating efficiency as another supply source, and therefore comparing it straight up acre feet that we anticipate we could conserve at what price point versus acre feet cost for some of these other options. I think that's where we're going to need to go as opposed to percentages. So I just want to put that on the table.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think also, Cynthia, your point in Tuesday's meeting was excellent, which is that it took a year to get to 25% reduction in the 76. Yeah. So I think that's a good base. And I think 18 out of 40 is pretty good, huh? I mean, it's not great.
Months, I think it is.
But it's pretty good. It's halfway there. I think we shouldn't rest on this, but it's important. I'd also like to note that LA Water and Power in the AWWA meeting a few days ago indicated they had spent $160 million on conservation. And they're much, much, much larger than us. But even then, 160 million is a change, to achieve the goal that they were after, which was substantial.
Right. And Met put almost $500 million with a B into turf changeouts. And again, I'm not comparing us to Met, but it's a significant investment, and we should be thinking in the same way. Anyway, I don't mean to be holding you up, Paul.
No. One other question.
Larry,
Thank you. On the calculation of the percentage, and I agree we need to go to acre feet at some point to really make a good comparison. But isn't the reduction based on an average of the last 3 years?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's to Jack's point about what that really represents. Yeah. It's a reduction from the average consumption recorded for the last 3 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and go ahead, Paul.
No, I was just going to reflect that this chart essentially reflects a sort of a 20% increase in storage as opposed to tackling it from conservation. So it's a little more simplistic.
So you're saying that, because that's one thing I wanted to point out. I mean, you're talking we've never been down in 11%, but that's without the 2 new reservoirs, huh? The last round. Now we have 2 new reservoirs added in. So the 11% includes the total volume, the 80,000 acre feet, right?
Yeah, this is 11,000 acre feet as opposed to 11%. Close enough, yeah,
But it's from the 80,000 acre feet.
correct.
So it's a much lower number than it would have been in 76.
Yes.
Because we, you know,
That's a
to get to
very
this
good-
level,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
to get to this level in 76, you'd be down more like 5,000.
Yeah, no, all excellent points, and you know, really acknowledging this is a crude slide, right, in terms of planning purposes and conservative for that reason, and we can make refinements as have been suggested to it to make it a little better for us. But as Ben pointed out, really this slide, we're trying to use this in a way that will help us guide decision points and milestones for any projects that we think we may need to pursue.
I think you're already there, Paul. I think this thing is fine from a percentage accuracy standpoint. You got the message across. That's all you need to do. I would not spend any more time fine tuning it because you don't have the data to be able to fine tune it. So yeah, I think you're fine here. I'm avoiding my clock analogy.
I was
But,
waiting for that.
Yeah, I know. See, I'm trickier than you think.
I know Director Schmidt will be disappointed as well. We'll move on a little bit here. So what have been our drought actions? Of course, our short-term actions continue to be our conservation and water efficiency, and that really is our top priority. And we need to adapt and change that as necessary to achieve the results that we need in the short term.
Yeah.
And you've heard about the
Paul, I'm sorry if I can interrupt again.
Yeah.
You say top priority. In the short term, it's the only priority unless I'm missing something.
You caught me out. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It is. But it does reflect that the entire organization is behind this effort, and there's a lot of effort behind the scenes at all different levels throughout the organization. And in some ways that maybe you don't see because they're very small and they're not directly related to the conservation program itself. For example, you know, enabling the sewer agencies to flush their mains with secondary effluent from the sewage treatment plants. That's a process that we went through with the regional board to get them the authority to go ahead and do that.
You know, that triggers a thought, Paul. It's probably an insignificant amount of water, but have we talked to the fire folks? I know,
Yeah.
Paul, Ben told me that we took back all of the eddy meters from the contractors. So they have to now use eddy meters on the reclaimed water, not on fresh water. But the fire folks don't have any meters, right? They just hook up to a fire hydrant and fill when they want.
That's correct. We have reached out to those folks, asking them not to go, you know, spray water all over the place.
Right, but in terms of the pumper trucks, have we asked them to fill them with reclaimed, or is that a little touchy?
We have not asked them to fill them with reclaimed.
Well, Director Russell, Chair Russell, it's actually a good point, and we should talk to them. I am aware in other circumstances the concern because they do, there can be contact with that water. But if it's just for training purposes, not just the important role of training purposes, that is something we could talk to them about.
Yeah, it's a good point. So just jumping back in, of course, we've made certain operational changes to optimize our supplemental water from Sonoma, and we've used and are using Sulahuli and have used Phoenix as well. And we continue to monitor the supply situation and our demand very closely. So, but what then if reservoir levels continue to drop, and the drought extends and intensifies through next year? What can we do? And obviously we need to add water supply at some point to our portfolio. And one of those options is water transfers. At its base level, of water transfer is very simple. It's bringing water in from out of the area. But at another, they're quite complex projects to undertake and complete. And essentially 4 main elements of a water transfer are the agreements that are required required for the source of the water, the wheeling, and sort of rights of way for infrastructure. And then in our case, it's complicated further by the fact that we're not really connected to another region. There are no pipelines, so we've got to connect our district to another region where water supplies exist. And for us, that means a pipeline on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge and the complexities associated with that. And then there are other infrastructure. We'll need to connect that pipeline on both sides of the bridge. And on the Richmond side of the bridge, we'll likely need a pump station. On our side of the bridge, we would need distribution system improvements. The system was not constructed to bring in large quantities of water at that location. And finally, there's a regulatory process, and the complexity of that really depends on the source of the water. And so the following slides will give us a little bit of an update as to where we are. As I started out, water transfers are complex, and the importance of an experienced team of professionals to help us through this process can't be underestimated. Our search in this area, it's a very specialized and limited field, and really two firms came to the surface, one of which was Woodard and Curran, who we already had a relationship with, but not with this team. The Woodard and Curran team involves very experienced personnel in water transfers, specifically Lindell Melton, Dennis Deemer, and Richard Sykes. So we have a very experienced team helping us. And that team at the moment is out searching for a source of water. And where, you might ask, are you going to find water in a drought, Paul? That seems like a fool's mission. But actually, the Sacramento River watershed is massive, and there are farmers that may fallow fields and other ways that we can get water from that watershed. It's probably available, but likely to be relatively expensive. Another option might be the McKellamie River watershed, where right now we don't really understand if water is available out there, but it might be a little bit less complex because we're not using state water project facilities, for example, to convey the water as we might need to if it was Sacramento River water. And then in Los Vaqueros, more locally for us, water availability discussions are beginning with Contra Costa. And then it would be remiss if we didn't at least look to the north to make sure that something hasn't been overlooked, largely because clearly the infrastructure exists to bring water to us, yet I think we all know that in that region, water is extremely scarce. Were we to find water, we would likely seek to secure an option to purchase that water. And that contract or agreement would, of course, be subject to our board approval and state agencies' approvals. And then we would need to have a wheeling agreement so that we would use existing facilities for another agency to bring water to our newly constructed facilities, the infrastructure on the bridge. The status of infrastructure on the bridges is that we've met and had discussions with Caltrans over the structural analysis and placement. Caltrans have assigned a project manager. And then as far as the other infrastructure goes, we're just beginning the scope development for that work.
Paul, do you have as folks are out looking for water, is there a target volume or a range that's being proposed?
So that's a great question. We did discuss that, and the volume that we're looking at is between 10 and 15,000 acre feet. And the rationale for that simply is that's about our human health and sanitation need. So these are projects, again, to restate, this is not, these are emergency supply projects where we're really looking at no water situation in our reservoirs. So, if that situation were to arise, and I realize that's a difficult thing to conceptualize and to think about the timing of, but that's what we're trying to do today. The regulatory process that I talked about.
Could we just pause there just for a second? So just to put that in context, and that's really helpful. So you said 9 to 10,000 acre feet is sort of a reasonable amount to assume that that's what we'd be able to wheel through a project like this, right?
10 to 15.
Okay, 10 to 15,000, great. And how does that compare to the water that we are looking at trying to conserve on a permanent basis? Like, not just asking people to, take short-term measures, but, with turf change outs and, long-term investments in decentralized, high efficiency appliances and that kind of thing. I think it's a much, much higher number, right?
I think we're trying to conserve the 40% level. I think we were.
Which is, I just think in terms of acre feet, can you?
Yeah. I was going to convert that to acre feet.
Great.
Somewhere in the region of 8 to 9,000 acre feet.
Okay, I thought that there was a much higher number that we could get to. I saw, all right, we can maybe talk about that offline, but I'd be surprised if we couldn't get to a much higher number with investments in those. And I'm not saying, I don't say that to say that we shouldn't be doing this, but you're talking about this as an emergency supply that we'd be investing in and using fairly rarely. And I mean, unless on your next slide, you're talking about obtaining permanent water rights, which I think would be incredibly difficult. And, I just want to be very clear. There's been so much interest in this as an option. And I think really laying out what we're really talking about here is an insurance policy, right?
Yes, in this case, it is an emergency supply project.
Yeah.
Could there be ancillary longer term benefits to the district having made these capital investments if we're driven to that point?
But I do think the notion and the term insurance policy is a really good way for us to be thinking about it, because we don't intend to do it. We're anticipating we won't need to do it, but we're just planning for it as an insurance policy. I think that is to be thinking about.
And I think that makes sense. I just, again, given the intensity of the public scrutiny on this and the emotions that it raises, I just think it really is critical that we are very transparent about the relative cost and the relative amounts of water that we're talking about here. A drought is a drought, and we can build all the infrastructure we want, and it's not going to make water appear if it doesn't exist. And certainly there are farmers, and I've spent a lot of my life with them, who have senior water rights, who are going to have more access to limited supplies. In those extreme situations, it's going to, we're talking about some, very high costs. Thousands and thousands of dollars an acre foot. And that's after you pay for the infrastructure and after you pay for the rights to wheel the water through the East Bay. Am I correct about that?
Undoubtedly. And in fact, water transfers are not a certainty, right? As you point out, California hydrologic conditions are varied and can change drastically.
Right.
And of course, here, the regulatory process and the complexity of this is belied by the simplicity of 4 bullets here. But if I were to add to these bullets, I would add, California Endangered Species Act and the Federal Endangered Species Act. These are not insignificant approvals that we need to hurdles to get through.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, so this is a conceptual timeline, and just opening the discussion here. The main thing to really take away, I think, from this slide for water transfers is presently we're just in feasibility, right? We're just out there considering what does this look like, and that's going to inform a timeline. So this is just my best guess, working with Ben and others to come up with a timeline. And looking at our decision point and what we think might be the fastest construction window possible, it looks like we could be looking at a decision point sometime in December and January of this year, early next year, for us to decide, do we want to move forward with water transfer? And there's a lot of significant work that would need to occur before that point in order to allow us to have a jump off sometime, January, December this year, January next year.
So Paul, you're saying that by December, January, next, you're going to have pretty much the list of pros and cons of each of these alternatives lined up?
I would say further than that, Director Gibson, we would need to be ready to bid the construction projects at that point.
Okay.
So that's why in these earlier timelines in July, just stepping through these, we'd be looking at securing an option and then various state approvals for that option, and then embarking upon infrastructure design. And again, these are very dependent on what we find in this feasibility. So it's pretty speculative, and that's as you go further out here, the arrows kind of become more transparent because we have a lot less certainty, right?
So to Paul, if I could,
Yep.
just very clear, because it's an important question Director Gibson had, right? Grantors use a term, and we've used it quite a bit here, shovel-ready projects.
That's right.
So our goal is to have this shovel-ready, so we're positioned for the decision-making along this time frame. And this will be refined as we get through this feasibility and scoping effort that we're now in, that we'll be talking about.
So this looks fast to me. I mean, I appreciate the urgency, but it's almost as if you think the decision has already been made. I mean, you're talking about making a go, no go decision in December, this December, right? For a permanent structure, even though, I mean, I guess the question in my mind is, you know, are we going to have the alternatives analysis, you know, and particularly the cost analysis done in time to make that kind of decision? This is an issue that is going to be of intense public interest. And, you know, certainly I believe that we should be moving with all deliberate speed to do what we can to ensure supplies for the future. But we've already said that this is something we're talking about doing in the event of a worst case scenario. And we all know that the past is not prologue, but we're also talking about massive, massive investments of dollars. And, you know, I think it's going to be a big lift to say we should be, because those dollars are going to be dollars that are diverted from other investments, and specifically investments in long-term water use efficiency. Do we want to be bringing in water from the Central Valley, contributing to the destruction of, well, certainly contributing to, challenges in the agricultural community from that water being diverted, potentially very significant environmental impacts if there's endangered species issues and other things. And we're doing that when we're still up above 100 gallons of water per person per day. We just heard the other night that some people are literally using thousands of gallons of water. I mean, we all want to be prepared in the event of the worst, but this is all proceeding as if we've done everything else we can do and we have no other choices. And I am concerned that we have really I am concerned about the precipitousness of this timeframe in light of how little we have invested so far in those other options.
And I hear you and appreciate it, and anticipating that perspective, which is why we showed and kicked off this discussion with that graph, acknowledging that this is a worst case scenario, acknowledging this is for insurance, but to have a valid insurance policy, we do need to look at when we would want the water to flow. And that's part of this. And 6 months for construction is lightning speed.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't even know at this point that December, January is sufficient, but we will be bringing back a lot of details in terms of the cost, more granularity as we understand that of what the projects could look like. And also, I want to assure the board and the public that this work is happening in parallel with all of our conservation work. So this is, again, to develop a insurance policy to ensure that we're ready for that decision making by the board in time for this to be in place were it needed, were we to be faced with the very, very low probability that we would need to do it, to have it in place.
Yeah, my view of this, quite frankly, is that there's a distinction between being in a position to make the decision and making the decision. I think we want to be in the position to make the decision, having all the T's crossed, I's dotted, have answers to all the questions as rapidly as we can possibly do it. The decision itself, however, obviously will take some time. I mean, that's a process in and of itself. But I think there are two distinct processes, and I think speed here is a good thing, not a bad thing.
So Jack and I are completely aligned on that. However, the problem with speed, so yes and yes. However, if the cost of speed is a lessening of the cost and other analyses that we need to compare these options in a reasonable way, then I think that's a problem. So yes, I totally agree with Jack that, preparing to make the decision and making the decision are different things. Maybe I need to hear more about what this means, securing an option in July. That sounds like a commitment to me.
Yes, so securing an option is exactly what it sounds like. It would be paying a nominal fee, per acre foot. I don't know, $10 per acre foot, but we don't know what that would actually be. It would be market dependent, presumably, and source dependent.
I'm not a water transfer expert by any means, and if that's what your team is telling you, then I'll accept that. But that does sound like an extraordinarily small amount of money to secure an option for water that people, again, we're talking about your worst case scenario, Paul. That means there's going to be literally no snowpack. So, the demand for Central Valley senior water rights water is going to be out of control. And we're going to be competing with Met. We're going to be competing with, LA. We're going to be competing with everybody in the entire state at that point. Again, to Ben's point, this is all about that worst case scenario. We're basically saying there's not going to be any snow in the Sierras. So, it doesn't take a financial genius to know that, the farmers in the Sac Valley with senior water rights, also on all those streams with, endangered species, they're,
Yeah.
we're talking about very expensive water.
I know that knowing that time is a little bit of the essence here this morning. I think that Director Kohler's point is really an important one, that if we're looking at needing to secure an option in a month in an unprecedented dry year, understanding what that range could look like, and when that decision be brought to the board, I think we need to do some thinking and planning around that.
Yeah, no, I hear all of the comments. Again, the secure an option, it's just the next step in the process. How and when that would obviously come to the board and be discussed, and a recommendation from our team. And to your point, Director Kohler, about there being no snowpack, that's why we would need to secure the option now to avoid the competitive nature of the market, the spot market later on.
Well, securing the option isn't securing the price.
No, agreed.
Oh, I'm just saying,
But in the event that you have no water, some water might be quite useful. Right? I'm not saying that's a good answer. I'm just, there's a limited set of tools that we have in order to ensure our water supply in the worst case scenarios.
I agree. And part of the reason I'm pushing on you guys so hard is because we keep talking as if we're doing what we need to do on conservation, and we are investing almost nothing. We have $100 million budget in this organization, higher than that, and we're investing less than $1 million in conservation rebates. So I am alarmed. Well, I don't want to say I'm alarmed. I am concerned that we're moving to these more extreme, very expensive options when we simply have not done what we need to do to get our community. I agree with everything I said earlier. Getting to 18% is great, but we have a lot longer to go. We just heard just 2 days ago or 3 days ago, whenever it was, a presentation about people continuing to use thousands and thousands of gallons of water per person per day. I'm not saying that we won't ever need this, but it is a concern that we seem to be telling the public that we have to go to this very extreme option because, we're out of other options. And I'm very concerned that that is an inaccurate message and not helpful when at a time when we are trying to get the public to work with us to understand the seriousness of the drought and the very, very large opportunities available to be more efficient, not just today, not just doing little things like shorter showers and turning off the water when you brush your teeth, but serious long-term investments in how we use water in this community. And we're not putting our money there.
I don't see this as moving away from conservation. We can chew gum and walk at the same time. We have.
There's only so much water, Jack. There's only so much money. There's only so much money.
Well, that's right. And we're not talking about spending a nickel today. This is find out what we can find out.
Well, once we, okay, like I say, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't plan. I'm concerned about the message we're sending. And, we're being asked in a month to secure an option. I mean, this is moving. Yeah, I just think
I think this is moving in as it should. We need to be prepared and we need to know this information.
Yeah.
So, but I do think we can ask, and Paul, you're taking a lot of tough questions, because obviously this is a very important issue. So thank you for the work you're doing. And I want to make it clear that we need to be looking into these options, but we need to have the right information so we make the right decision about whether to pursue these options. And so I think the cost, the cost for, the cost of this particular option is something that we need to understand, so that we could say, could we get that same volume of water through conservation and efficiency, or can we do it some other way? This is going to be an investment, and whether it's a short-term or a long-term one, we just need to understand the numbers so that we make the right decision given the situation that we are in an extreme drought. So thank you for this. And if you can just, I think, keep track of how we're asking for sort of additional contextual information that will help. That will enable us to be prepared to make a good decision if we need to come July.
Yeah. A couple of points here. The 40% we're talking about is less than 10,000 acre feet per year. So just to put things in perspective. The other question I have is, I agree completely with where we're going here, because it's hard to fire the gun if you don't have any bullets. And they're not going to shoot the gun. They're just getting the bullets into the bag. And I think we have to know the answers to get the questions. And I think the other thing you're forgetting about here is groundwater. I don't envision this coming from surface water. I think although the last time it was wheeled by MWD to us from the Central Valley Project. But I think that groundwater there's a whole game of private supplies here. And I think we need to keep that in mind. And like I say, I think, we're in the planning stage here, and I think they're doing the right thing. We need to get the alternatives on the table. I agree with you, Cynthia. We need to push harder on conservation. And as Jack said earlier, it's the only tool we have at this moment. But my last comment is, how long did it take to put the pipeline across the bridge the last time?
I don't have the construction window for that.
Yeah, I don't either. I think it's less than 6 months.
Yeah,
But what, Jack?
I think it was months.
Yeah.
Months, yeah.
It was not years. Yeah.
No.
So I think we're all on the same page about the need to plan. The reason I'm raising these issues, and then I will, let Paul continue with his presentation, is because there's been a disproportionate amount of focus on what is a fairly extreme, very expensive option, really drowning out what we can and need to be doing at much lower price point in the near term. So I think we are absolutely aligned that we need to be considering these things. I think the focus on this timeframe is concerning to me. I like your analogy as much as I don't like guns, Larry. But
best I could do.
So I get that. So I'm with you. My point is simply that we not be precipitous and suggest that this is our focus, right? I mean, it is enormously important that we consider a full range of options. Water transfers are obviously a viable option. I think we need to be very clear about how uncertain they are, how much risk they put us at if we will over rely on them. And look, everybody makes their own decisions about insurance. Some people are willing to pay whatever it takes to have insurance. Other people say, you know what, at some point the cost is too high and I'm going to go with these other options. So I am concerned about it being a distraction, but other than that, I am not objecting to the planning going forward.
Speaking of groundwater, is there any hope that we could undertake a groundwater share with Sonoma in the near future?
That was part of, if you remember, the fourth area we were looking at, which was, I think I referred to it as SCWA, but just looking up at that whole watershed, which would include groundwater in the Petaluma Basin, Sonoma Basin. Yeah.
is there any, discussion or, moving forward with that?
Well, the question, there is no discussion at the moment to answer your question directly. Some of the issues might be, you could imagine if you were Petaluma sitting on groundwater in a drought, would you be so eager, right, to sell it to MMWD? So we will be exploring all of those options.
Yeah, I think it depends what the capacity is and how much we would need. So, yeah. Well, I'm glad you're exploring the options. So that to me seems like the most realistic way to go.
Yeah, it'd be great, right? The infrastructure exists. Be fairly simple if that could happen. Okay, so
Yeah, and in fact, all that we have to do is get them to use their groundwater and let the aqueduct water come through. Huh?
Yeah.
Right.
They don't have to do anything, right? It's just diverting where they get their water from.
Yeah, we'll have more information on that aspect. So that was water transfers. Good discussion there. The other option looking at today is desalination. And if the board recall, the pilot program, I think from 2005 to 2007, demonstrated that the bay can, of course, be a source for drinking water, and that environmental impacts can be mitigated. Our progress to date on this option, we've engaged the services of Kennedy Jenks and Jacobs, who were the team on the pilot program, and that helped them hit the ground running, establishing what our water quality standards would be from a reverse osmosis system. And we've identified equipment vendors and issued an RFQ, which is just to assess interest and availability. Again, also to give us an idea of what sort of capacity is available on a short-term basis. And then we'll look at options for the board to consider between purchase and leasing of equipment. And maybe leasing at the moment seems like it may be more viable than purchase. And then finally, with this option, we need to review the implications of the prior ballot measure and the effect that may have on the timing of this project. And so with that, here's another similar conceptual time frame for desalination. Today in June, we're really just feasibility level. And again, similar to water transfers, there's a great deal of work and uncertainty associated with desalination, not the least of which is the potential ballot measure, and how would you control the outcome of a ballot measure sufficiently to plan for a project of this nature. And then there's a lot of engineering and state approvals that would need to occur. Again, it looks like a construction window of about 6 months would be quite aggressive, which if we want the water to flow in June, which again, acknowledging the conservative nature of the estimate, but it's sort of a planning estimate. It looks like December, January again would be a decision point for a go, no-go for construction of a desalination facility. This is an emergency desalination water supply.
So again, I wouldn't want to take planning options off the table, but I think I'm going to want to see the staff come back to the board at the next board meeting with some cost numbers, just even to do the studies. Because again, we are investing such a minute amount of money into conservation at this point, and we're hiring consultants to do all these other things. And I think we need some transparency about what we're spending and what we think we're going to be spending on these items. I'm not seeing the same kind of ambition when it comes. We're doing a lot of talking about efficiency, and we're also moving past it very, very quickly. So I'd like the staff to please come back with some hard numbers about these are expensive consultants. They're smart. I'm sure they know what they're doing, and they all cost a great deal of money. So let's have some numbers and see what we're doing, because, I think that's what we need to. These are very aggressive timelines, and having been through desal before, my recollection, and Paul, I believe you were there as well. I believe, just to put this out there, we were looking at 20% rate increases every year for over a decade. for over a decade. That may not be where we're at right now, but I mean, the financial burden on the district so we can keep watering at the rate of 300 gallons of water per person per day is not reasonable. So we need to get real about not just having water, but what we're using it for and what we're paying for it.
I think those numbers are still good, Cynthia, if not low,
So, I mean,
those kind of increases.
so again, planning, sure, let's plan, but let's be real about what we're spending our money on. Let's be real about, I mean, this is an incredibly fast time frame for, for something that simply may not be viable from a financial perspective. I mean, this assumes that we're literally doing nothing but providing people with the most basic amount of water they need to live and, to live. And we're just not even close to that. So I am alarmed about the staff coming to us and saying, we're going to be making decisions in 6 months that are going to put this kind of financial burden on our ratepayers.
Again, I'm hearing we'll be in a position to make decisions in 6 months.
Well, and again, I'm not saying one word here about cost.
Yeah.
I'm seeing legal review, I'm seeing regulatory approvals. We're just moving right past cost.
Well, that would be part of the decision making, of course.
And yet it's not here. I mean, I understand. I'm just saying it's not even a consideration in this chart.
Well,
Where, if I could, we're at the feasibility stage, and certainly a key part of the scoping and feasibility is developing costs. We know we're talking about tens of millions of dollars.
We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. It was $100 million 15 years ago, and
Right.
6 million in operating costs every single year.
Right. So the transfer is tens of millions of dollars. Absolutely. The desal is more than that and has a host of complications and probably even more.
Not to mention greenhouse gas, implications.
These are not attractive projects, and staff is in no way advocating for them.
yeah. Let's get the numbers and then say no, not say no, and without the numbers. Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying no, I'm saying I would like to see this level of seriousness and investment in the options that we have that can actually get us through this in the near term.
Well, maybe we need a separate addressing of that issue. I mean, let's talk more about that. That's.
I agree, Jack. I agree.
think
That's
you
the
get
way
a
to
lot
handle
of
it.
support for that, but that's not a reason to obstruct this.
Well, nobody's obstructing, but this is a really fast time frame. And I'm just saying, given that we've been down this path and we know that 15 years ago, the costs were astronomical, I think we need to be real about that.
I think that these are all good points, but I think we are where we are in time, and this is what we have to do, the decisions we have to make on this time frame to be as prepared for a terrible scenario as possible. So again, I just think it comes back to making sure that we have the right information in front of us at our next board meeting to be able to provide guidance. It strikes me that the July meetings are going to be very intense with a lot of very important stuff to digest. So I just want to make sure that we well, I don't.
There's simply not enough time.
I don't know whether that's true or not. I just want to make sure that whether we can or not is going to be dependent on whether we have the right information pulled together to support a decision or not. But I'm just starting with, let's make sure we have the right information, which I think Director Kohler is what you're asking for as well. So like,
it is what I'm asking for. I'm sorry to interrupt. My point is this cannot be done in 2 weeks. July is 2 weeks away. The end of July is 6 weeks away. We have been down this path, and all of us on the board and everybody in the room knows how long it takes to do a CEQA document, and it isn't 6 weeks. We know how long it takes to do these cost analyses. You're talking about going to PG&E with an application in 2 to 6 weeks.
In 2 to 6 weeks, we'll have more information. Maybe you're absolutely right. We won't have all the information, and that'll delay it. But we won't get there until we start.
My concern, so we are all in agreement about the need to plan. My concern is that I don't want the timeline shortchanging us on analysis. And that's what I'm seeing here, because we are all people who have been through these processes. We all know how much time they take.
Director Kohler, just if I could add, just to emphasize, this is very much a conceptual timeline and by no means intended to be a stake in the sand. The only thing that we're trying to convey really with any certainty is that these projects are lengthy construction projects, and it looks like a decision point at some point, December, January is maybe the latest that we would want to look at.
Yeah.
Okay, if December, January is the latest you want to look at it, then you're going to need to come up with some cost information. I mean, I think it's concerning to me that you're talking about developing plant layout. This is what you guys are putting out to the public today. This is what's going to be in the news, right? This is what you guys are choosing to message right now. We're going to, in a month, develop plant layout, go to PG&E with an application, which sure sounds like a decision to me, and it's going to sound like a decision to everybody else, and do a legal review of the need for a ballot measure without one word about cost, about alternatives. So, you know, it is a concern to me that we are rushing through the most important decisions that we need to be making here based on scenarios that I understand are worst case scenarios, and that is very, very responsible and appropriate for us to be considering that. But it is also concerning to me that we are moving very quickly past these critically important financial and alternative considerations. It can't be done in a month. We all know it can't be done in a month. And I'm concerned that we're telling the public that it can. You guys, we've all been through these processes. How long did we do desal last time? It simply can't be done in a month. We shouldn't pretend that it can. It's not responsible. I'm sorry.
So,
Paul, I think part of what we're struggling with is how uniquely rapid this particular drought in its severity came upon us. And I think we and so many agencies were caught a little flat-footed in terms of the really historic nature of how quick this occurred. Often historically, droughts don't come this quick. And that's what this is reflected. And I think these are great comments, and we're hearing all of this. And I think as we bring additional information, the board's going to get more information, more detailed information, and staff is going to do our utmost to not just bring the right information, but also to continue to focus and enhance. And we have a discussion with the board planned on conservation along the lines that I believe is what you're looking for. So I think we can and we have to do both of these in parallel, and we're really going to continue to work hard to do that.
Yeah, I have complete confidence in our professional staff. I've never seen them shortchange anything in the past, and I'm confident they're not going to do it now. And I have complete confidence in our board that we don't jump to decisions, and we're not going to make a decision before we're totally ready to do it. So, I mean, I don't know what more secure position you can be in.
So I think we all agree about that, Jack. But remember, we are a public agency, and this is a public meeting, and all of our meetings are public. And as a public advocate myself, I think that's a great thing, because we want to have this conversation with our community, and we need to bring them along.
Yep.
So we are not just talking about, we're not just talking about providing information to the board, as critical as that is. We are also talking about providing information to the public, to our ratepayers, to our residents, to our businesses. And I think that we need to consider that as well as we put these messages out there, because every single meeting we have is, of course, a public message. And we need to think about that as we're putting these options out there. And we need to think about how the public is going to react to this kind of thing and to the timeline that you're putting out there. Ben, I am 100% with you about the historic nature of this drought, how fast it came along. I have nothing but high regard for you and Paul and the rest of the team, and the work that you've put into to put these plans together. I'm simply saying, and this is the last time I'll say it, is that we are creating, as important it is that we create a sense of urgency, we appear to be running over and running past our most affordable and our most effective options. And that is going to make the focus on this kind of thing in this time frame, I think, very challenging indeed.
Yeah, great points. Okay, I think I have one more slide. And to your to your point, and insufficiently so, perhaps, Director Kohler, conservation and water use efficiency remain our primary focus. And these efforts are intensifying. And from what I understand, in terms of level of effort and efficiency or effectiveness of conservation, what we saw in the 70s drought were that as we increased the penalties for water use, the water efficiency improved dramatically each time. And so that isn't necessarily a cost to us to do, but of course there would be cost associated with enforcement activities. And that's a decision at a future board meeting.
My guess is they probably won't cost $100 million.
I hope not.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
You're right. You're right.
somehow we only talk about cost when we're talking about conservation, and we talk only about how much we need water when we talk about importing it from far, far away. And I think we need to start talking about these things on an even playing field.
And we hear that.
Okay.
I
As
think
for
every
these-
board member agrees with that.
And just wrapping up, for these two options, as we continue forward, the team will be looking for someone that can sell water and to discuss with the board the desire to secure that option. We'll continue to work with Caltrans in a planning sense, and we're going to pursue infrastructure design concepts and perhaps discuss wheeling with an East Bay agency just so we can lay that groundwork. In terms of desalination, we still, to your point about cost, need to understand what capacity we can get in the time that we have for a project of this nature. And we need to understand, I think as you pointed out, Director Kohler, what are the permitting requirements that we're going to face? And not least, of course, clarify the implications of the ballot measure for this item.
We might also want to do some polling about how people are going to feel about having their rates raised 20-25% every year for the next decade. That might be something we'd like to know as well.
Yeah, even if we get that far with this option, exactly.
Well, I think we have to get that far or we can't consider the option. That would be part of the information that you guys need to gather. I don't think we can make a decision without understanding those impacts.
And that's all I had for tonight.
Okay, it only seems.
Well, it's not tonight yet.
Yeah, that just
Did I
seemed.
say tonight? Sorry,
Yeah.
today.
It just feels like tonight already.
It's odd seeing you all in the daytime, not at 11 o'clock at night.
The day got that long.
Okay, very good job, Paul.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I have to sign off. I am actually doing a webinar on water use efficiency for the National League of Cities right now. So I will talk to you all. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thanks, Cynthia. Take care.
Bye.
Okay. Public comment?
No, yes, Rebecca Collins. Go ahead, Ms. Collins.
Hi, I wanted to start off by, can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Okay, good. By thanking board member Larry Bragman for this quote in the IJ, where he said, rather than impose new watering restrictions on individual homeowners, the district could instead prohibit watering non-essential turf such as grass in front of commercial buildings, office complexes, traffic medians, and multi-unit housing projects, properties. When I read that, it really drew me up short. And that's why I appreciate Larry bringing it out so much, because I didn't know that non-essential turf at this point in this drought was still using non-potable water. And, no, I'm sorry, I just like, it really shocked me, you guys. I don't understand. And there was a lot of talk about messaging today and by the director. And, and now we're talking about desal, we're talking about pipelines. And it's hard for me to still believe that that's true, that non-essential turf is being watered. In our household, we're flushing the toilet once a day. We're trying to stretch our laundry to 2 weeks.
you know, I mean, so I'm sorry, like, we're scared here, okay? And I don't understand at this point, like when I go hiking up in the water district and I see what the reservoir looks like, I don't understand how non-essential turf fits into the hierarchy of water needs. You know, it's so upsetting to have read that. And I would really like some answers on that before we move any further. I mean, why does business, why are they allowed to keep green lawns now and I can only flush my toilet once a day and you guys are demanding that we cut 40%? I don't have any resentment towards that. And I don't think the majority of the people in this community do, but it just, I mean, it's such a mixed message. How did that happen?
Well, thank you for your comments, Ms. Collins. Ben, you want to respond? Because I don't think it has happened. We're asking the same reductions from everybody. It isn't just residential.
That's correct, Director Russell. We are employing all efforts to bring water cuts in terms of usage to all sectors, residential, commercial, institutional. We're working hard with cities and towns on parks and open spaces. We're severely cutting back, certainly things like golf courses. We're taking a hard look at putting restrictions on homeowner associations, common areas. We're working with restaurants to reinforce the need not to serve water except upon request, and considering further sorts of instructions to a range of commercial, institutional, all sectors, multifamily, single family homes across the board. And this, again, part of it is the pace of how quick this drought came upon us. And we're doing every effort to get messaging out there, but it is imperfect and it's difficult to get the message across to every single customer and business in the same time and in the same fashion. But we're confident that we are seeing the reduction. The 18% across the board has been a very positive sign. And it's not just reflective of single family homes and residential. We are seeing reductions and we are seeing this pick up across so many uses of our water supply. And we're going to continue to strengthen the message and work to deepen conservation across the board.
And to that, go ahead, Jack.
I'll let Larry speak for himself, but the way I interpreted the comment was pretty much exactly what she is saying, that's not right, and to the that that's where we should be putting the brunt of our regulation is on those where there's less impact on the individual homeowners if we take that approach. So
right, and I think when we have our next board meeting where we're going to have another ordinance, some of those things should be called out. I know we're going to try to call it out. It's actually not that easy to define non-essential turf or non-functional turf. You know, we should give it a shot, and that was my idea as a suggestion for moving forward. So we are thinking about it, and it's hopefully it's going to be in the mix when we consider our next round of restrictions. So stay tuned.
And to that end, both Jack and I know personally that some of our largest water users have already accomplished 40% reductions.
Right.
So it isn't just laying onto the residential users. It's across the board. And I presume, Ben, although we haven't had a specific discussion about it, that the 1 day a week irrigation applies to the commercial buildings as well as the non-commercial buildings.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I question how we're going to enforce that, but the one good thing, as I said, I think our meter readers can be very helpful to us because they're standing in front of the building, and if the grass is green, then the situation. And we probably need to think about some kind of a communication effort to try and shake people away from grass. Las Vegas has done a very good job of it. You know, they're aggressive on getting rid of it. They want no grass in Las Vegas, basically. That's where they're headed. And, you know, I don't see that while we're not in the temperature zone of Las Vegas, we're closer to Las Vegas than we are to London.
Right, which is where I got the idea. I actually spoke to the assemblyman who introduced it in the Nevada legislature. You know, and it just, not to beat a dead horse again, but conspicuously absent from our conservation tips is the simple toilet flushing, deferred toilet flushing, whatever you want to call it. You know, that activates people, it gets people engaged, and I do think we need to put that out to the public.
And I, you know, as you've heard me talk about my 35 gallons for 2 people per day, we flush the toilets as infrequently as possible and always with recaptured water that would have been wasted during the shower heat up. So, you know, that's exactly what we're doing. But even then we conserve the number of cycles of the flushing the toilet.
Right. And it's not there on our conservation page. And
No, that's a good point.
It should be added.
Jeannie and I, subsequent to your earlier comments, have had a discussion, and we will be doing that.
Good.
So it will be added to the website, and in the next newsletter, it's included in our tips. So it's in there, and we updated some of our advertising to reflect that and include it. So
Good.
Cool.
Good.
And you can go back to the old ones, you know, if it's yellow, let it mellow or something, whatever it was. If it's brown, flush it down. You know, I mean, you've got the roots exist. People are familiar with the words.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Chair Russell, I have 2 more speakers for public comment.
Sure.
The next one is the last 4 digits of the phone number, 8800. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Nancy Okada from San Anselmo. I'm really concerned. I agree with Director Kohler. Spending the money to find out how much it's going to cost to put the pipeline as well as to build the desal plant costs staff time, and it costs money. And that money is going to be our rate increase to find out stuff that, in fact, maybe we don't need, and in fact, only in an emergency when the reservoirs are totally dry. So I think that you really need to, like she said, bump up the conservation. You are sending a mixed message. You're sending a mixed message when you refuse to do moratoriums on new buildings, you know, on new water hookups. And you are sending so many mixed messages that the public is just spinning. But that's what you maybe want the public to do. So, you know, I think the thing is, you've got to really consider that water is a finite resource. And I'm a member of the Sierra Club's Water Committee in the Bay chapter, and we are hearing from other chapters all over the state that every other district has this attitude, that they're going to get the water from somewhere. They're going to pull it out of the groundwater. They're going to manufacture it with a desal. You know, they're going to do something, and it's going to miraculously appear. That's not the case. You guys have to get realistic. You have to get realistic about money. You have to get realistic about water. And, you know, we're all conserving, and we're conserving on our own. I don't know how you guys are conserving, but we're conserving incredible amounts of water. And then you are just, you know, like flushing it down the toilet. So you really need to look at your budget and not spend staff money on things that are not going to make money, are not going to help us through this drought. And so I would request also, you know, that you really look at the moratorium on the new hookups, because this is really going to send a much better message to the public. And right now you've got it in the plan that we're going to be down to almost 0 before you even consider it. If you look at page 483 in your document of the 770 pages that was on the board agenda. So thank you very much for listening to me. Bye.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Laura Sheraton. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, thank you so much. I know it's a difficult, incredibly difficult challenge that you all have, and I appreciate your work on this. I want to echo the sentiments of Rebecca Collins as well as Nancy Okada. One of the things that where another quandary is, you want us to water our landscapes less, but people are cutting down trees all over the place and destroying the shade that keeps the water in the ground for other plants and plant communities. So, you know, it's at cross purposes that we're destroying the environment. And I think that's really obvious when you look at the ridges where there are very large trees and giving tree rain that allow green, lush landscapes to persist in spite of this drought. I want to say, I think Cynthia Kohler is right. I think we need to expand the conservation efforts before we go to the more draconian issue of trying to obtain water from other locations that may not have it for very long either. And the other thing is we need to be supporting groundwater infiltration, which also gets damaged when tree removal occurs en masse. I want to see a moratorium on hookups, a moratorium on all lawns. And I know that we had Frank Egger speak about what's happening in Healdsburg, and Windsor has been offering 50 cents a square foot for some time. I know you guys actually offer more, but the message isn't getting out. So I agree, we need to work on the messaging. And I think we are not in the same cultural environment as we were at the last big drought. There are people here who, and forgive me if I offend anybody, but that have so much money that they can afford to pay these rates, and it's not a disincentive for them if they get fined $250. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no further speakers.
Okay. Any other board comment? I think we've been around the loop, huh? Hi, Stanley. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Fine, fine. Item 3.
Yes, this is a rather mundane item. The easement agreement for the installation of a fire line at 30 Forest Court in San Anselmo. Basically, it's pretty much as it is explained in the summary. I'll just go ahead and read it. The owners of a single-family residence at 30 Forest Court have requested the installation of a new 6-inch fire line for fire protection on their property, and the relocation and upgrade of their existing 5/8-inch water meter to a 3/4-inch water meter. The existing water meter was installed in 1949 and is located more than 500 feet from their home and crosses several private properties. The locations of the new water meter and the fire line are directly adjacent to the property that fronts the water main. The existing water main is in the private driveway, and the district has an existing easement for this main. However, the easement only goes to the center of the roadway. For this reason, a new 20-foot wide easement is needed for the location of the new water facilities. The property owners have signed the district's standard easement agreement, a copy of which is attached to this item. So staff is recommending that the committee review and refer this item to the board and provide the general manager with the authority to execute the easement agreement. And that's it.
Any idea why they didn't connect to that location the first time?
Probably because the existing main was already there, and there was probably no need to do that. We want to have easements for all of our facilities, and so because this is a new facility, we need to have, and the fact that they're installing a new meter, we want to have an easement for all of our facilities that we'll be maintaining.
Could I ask sort of a related but unrelated question? And I don't know if Stanley is the repository of the information, but when we are installing new meters, can we require that they install an AMI meter?
I'd have to check on that. I'm not certain that that is a requirement. It's probably an option that they do so.
I mean, it seems under the circumstances, that might be a good policy for us to pursue. I mean, it's a one-time fee, and, compared to everything else that they're doing now, it's probably pretty insignificant. And, we may be able to sort of slowly increase that AMI system. I mean, it's just an option. I'm just wondering whether that would be a feasible thing to do.
Yeah,
It's
Larry,
probably-
we've
yeah,
started
go ahead.
those discussions at our drought meetings as a future requirement.
I mean, how long is it going to take to implement it? And
Well,
shouldn't
we're also in the,
and shouldn't we be giving customers an option to do it right away?
right, yeah. Last year, we put together a feasibility study for AMI, which is a planning report that details different alternatives moving forward if we were going to go system wide. And we're at a crossroads right now in terms of, do we want to continue with these cellular endpoints or move to system wide AMI? And we're actually putting together an RFP to have a consultant engineering firm put together essentially plans and specs to put something out to bid to move us to complete system wide AMI. And so we'll get some costs on that. In the meantime,
I'm just, we're talking about millions of dollars for new source. And in the meantime, maybe we can do it sort of on a case by case basis. Anyway, just a question and just something for the board to think about. But, given what we're going through right now, it just seems like, maybe the most practical approach. What do you think about that, Director Russell?
Hang on. There we go. Sorry. Yeah, I think that works. Seems to me.
Just doing it on giving them the option to do an AMI meter or to require an AMI meter. I mean, why?
Well, the problem is, yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, when I've explored this particular issue, the AMI side of it is more controlled by the district than by the user. I'm sure if we put it out on an open thing, 20 or 30% of the users would opt immediately for AMI or more. Yeah. But when I pushed forward on this thing, I get some minor pushback on the district side of it, because of setup and location and whether they have cell phone or not, and there's an on and on and on and on kind of things. So I don't think it hurts to say what maybe the compromise is to put an AMI in as soon as possible or as soon as feasible.
well, let me just point out that, the majority of our meters are actually, the meter body itself is, would accept an AMI endpoint, the register on it. So it's not a matter of whether or not it can be done. It absolutely can, because the meter body is built in a way to allow that addition of an AMI endpoint. It's really a matter of system wide. Are we, the feasibility study recommended, to move to radio AMI versus the cellular
Cell phone.
endpoints.
Sure.
In terms of life cycle costs and
sure.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's one issue. Also, I don't know that I take that bet on a 1949 meter, Crystal, whether it's a census compatible. I don't know if it's a Badger meter or not in 49.
Well, no, we replace the meters more often than from its initial installation date. Yeah, I'm sure it's got a newer meter
And
on
I'm
it,
just
but
talking
they're
about
upsizing.
most of our new meters are upsizing existing services. So, they're getting new meters and they would be AMI compatible, I assume. So I just think, I wanted to put it out there and just see whether that would be a policy we could adopt, because, the customers would probably be happy to pay for it. It's probably not.
Yeah, well, they're paying one way or the other, huh?
Right.
I mean,
Is there any need or reason to, I've always thought of those systems going out in like a segmented area where Belvedere Tiburons, where I think we have most of them, maybe all of them. And I didn't realize you could just spot them out anywhere, which I gather you can do. Is there?
You can, Jack, as long as you have cell phone service.
Yeah, is there any coordination that needs to be done with our meter reader programs? I mean, what meter reader would just skip that house, I presume, for purposes of reading the meter.
It's going to save us money. I mean, I just,
Yeah.
Well, you hit on something interesting, Larry. I mean, it seems logical to me that we could extend this to due on sale.
You could do that too, but I mean, if we're going to be replacing meters, we should
certainly every one of those, yeah.
At a minimum, give folks the option and maybe make it mandatory. So, I don't want to get us too distracted, which I know everybody's time is valuable, but it's something we could do. It's at modest cost, modest action, modest staff aggravation, I hope. And just, I think, something to think about. Well,
and keep in mind that it automatically returns, because even if the meter reader has to walk right past it, he still didn't have to stop. So there's a cost savings immediately, a little bit, and eventually a lot, not a lot, but significant.
Yeah, as we go forward. So just, I mean, you could throw that in the next ordinance when it comes to the board. I mean, it's just something very sort of simple, that we might consider. So that's my idea. So
do you want to put it in this one, or do you want to let Stanley just go forward with what we got here?
I think we should let this one maybe go, maybe give the folks the option. I don't know if he's going to be talking to them or not. And if it's feasible, I think we should put it out there, but I think as far as our ordinance that's going to come back to us in a couple of weeks, maybe our staff could come up with a real simple policy that we could implement.
Of course, one way to make it simple is we just make it our policy, right? That when we do this, we install an AMI at our cost, and just make that the policy, that if you're going to get I don't quite remember what this one's called. If this is a meter extension, or what's this one called, Stanley?
This is a fire line.
Fire line. Okay.
Yeah.
So, we could just make it the policy.
Yeah. Well, I leave it to the rest of the board, but it's just something that crossed my mind, and it came up when I looked at Stanley's report.
We'll take these comments and think about how to integrate the concepts directly into the ordinance, but we'll bring it back in context of the discussions at the next board meeting.
That'd be great. And I really appreciate that. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Stanley.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I need a motion, I think.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we'll put this on consent at a future board meeting for the easement approval.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Stanley. Good to see you.
You too.
Okay, number 4 is professional services agreement with Woodward and Curran.
Chair Russell, if I may, very quickly, do we have any public comment on the last item?
No, there are none.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jared. I knew that.
Jared.
I have good intuition.
Yeah.
Hi,
Okay, number 4.
Hi, I'm Alex and I, engineer manager of the design section. This morning, I'm bringing forth the item for the professional services agreement with Woodward and Curran for engineering services in support of the preliminary design for the Pine Mountain Tunnel replacement project. As you guys know, the Pine Mountain Tunnel was built in 1919 and consists of a 8,700 foot long tunnel that's still in use today and provides water storage and surge protection to the Ross Valley system, which comprises of approximately 44,000 district customers, which is roughly 23% of the district service area. Pine Mountain Tunnel is more than 100 years old and is severely deteriorated and past its design service life. District staff have been in ongoing
If it ever had a design service life.
Well, yeah, right, true. I agree with that, Director Russell. And, you know, as you're all aware, the district staff have been in ongoing communications with the State Water Resources Control Board regarding the district's progress for the decommissioning and replacement of this tunnel. As previously discussed with the Water System Master Plan update back in May 21st at the Operations Committee meeting, the next step for the Pine Mountain Tunnel replacement is to integrate the engineering studies with the environmental documentation needed for the project by preparing the preliminary design of the project to a 30% design level. District staff have engaged environmental science associates under the district's on-call contract to prepare the environmental documentation for the Pine Mountain Tunnel replacement project. A necessary component of completing this environmental documentation is having the preliminary design included with the documents. Once the preliminary design and CEQA are completed, the district will be ready to proceed with a final design and construction. In support of the Water System Master Plan, the district and its consultant, Woodard and Curran, conducted a focused evaluation of the storage needed to replace Pine Mountain Tunnel and support the larger Ross Valley system. A sizing study for the Ross Valley system determined that 3 to 4 million gallons of storage is needed to replace Pine Mountain Tunnel at a similar elevation to meet the district's standard pressure zone criteria. The new project sites and previously identified sites were evaluated for project suitability, and the preferred project location for a replacement storage facility to replace Pine Mountain Tunnel that best meets the district's needs is along Concrete Pipe Road near Drainage Culvert number 5, also known as CP5. These results were presented by district staff to the Operations Committee during the Water System Master Plan update in May, just this past month. The district consultant Woodard and Curran's project team has experience in water distribution systems and has developed a significant and high-level understanding of the district system, in particular with the Ross Valley system through their work in support of the Water System Master Plan and the Ross Valley evaluation. The district is anticipating to be complete with the preliminary 30% design by September of this year. That being said, district staff does recommend the Operation Committee review and refer this item to the board with the recommendation to authorize the general manager to execute a professional service agreement with Woodard and Curran for professional engineering services in support of the preliminary design of Pine Mountain Tunnel replacement project in the amount of $477,662 with a staff requested contingency of $42,000 for a total not to exceed amount of $519,662. District staff will be making a recommendation for award of a professional services agreement for the preliminary design at a future regularly scheduled board meeting. I'll take any questions at this point.
I would, Alex, if I could, just wanted to add a bit, which is, as we've talked with the board, this is a multi-benefit project. This is to, in addition to replacing this old infrastructure that's very necessary, this increase in volume will raise the standards in terms of potable supply. It also addresses a longstanding water quality concern and provides additional water to support wildfire mitigation efforts, response efforts in that event. And our goal is to have this essentially shovel ready to be able to, and we are in discussions with a range of state folks to really make a good effort to get a sizable portion of this project grant funded.
Great. That's great. What size tank are you looking at CP5?
It's right now, Woodard and Curran is between 3 and 4. They're leaning on the 4 million gallon size though.
Okay. I know Xavier was saying, you know, there's a certain amount, sorry.
So your dogs agree, huh?
Oh, well, they're critical.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that they don't like it. Okay, okay.
See who's
I took it the other way. They were cheering us on.
They like
Correct.
CP5. They do.
Yeah.
They've been there. I visited there with them.
Yeah.
So only, I'm not second guessing, but, I guess I go with Director Russell's sort of mantra that more is more. And if you could, whether it's worth putting an extra 1 million gallons up there, or whether it should at least be considered, that's all. But I think the location it's really the best location. And, I definitely support moving forward with it. So.
Cool. One thing I would request, Alex, is I think this is hefty enough that we'd like to see it maybe with a monthly a summary, at least at the dock. Just have a little, 10-minute like this, but more specific to where they are today, not where they are in getting to 30%, but where they are conceptually. So we see a little drawing.
Yeah.
Director Russell, our first step is to do some geotech work, which will August. We have to get some borings, so that'll inform the design.
Of course.
Yeah.
What's this, and I don't mean this critically at all, but it's sort of the project without end. Do we have like a end date for this? It's been coming to the board periodically with various issues for years. When do we have Pine Mountain Tunnel off the table?
Yeah, we're pushing hard to get we're thinking it's going to be a mitigated neck deck that will go out for public comment in late September or October, and that'll be a 30-day review period. Once we get through the CEQA analysis, then we can move to getting the final design together for bid. So hopefully by early next year, we'll be out to bid and ready to start construction.
Okay, good. All right, well, I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay. So it's just moving it forward, right, to the consent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what we're after.
Do you want to ask for public comment?
Sure.
Are there any public comments? There are none.
Okay. Alrighty, with that, thank you all for your patience and hanging in there, your resiliency.
Yeah.
And we'll go forward. Thank you. Take care.
Have a
Thank
good
you very
see
much.
everybody.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.